Hello, Professor and fellow classmates. For our presentation, we'll be taking a look at the current use of conflict minerals in the global supply chain for consumer electronics. You are looking at a picture here of a Congolese miner descending into a mine shaft. As you can see, he has no safety equipment, no hard hat, no breathing equipment. He is actually mining with hand tools for cobalt that will eventually make its way through the supply chain and into the smartphones we use every day. It is a tragic story currently for miners like these, and we hope to draw attention to the unacceptable conditions they work in and the unacceptable stories of human rights violations throughout the supply chain. Here's a look at our agenda. My name is Trey, and I'll be giving a brief background on conflict minerals. Howie and Brett will be doing the ethical analysis on some of the consistent ethical concerns that are still present in the supply chain. And finally, Nishant and Nikhil will examine some of the current laws we have to regulate conflict mining and fair labor practices. They will also discuss what can be done to improve the current laws. This is a photo taken by the National Geographic in 2013. It is clearly a child in the picture laboring in a mine. You can see he is barefoot and using only a shovel. This is probably what a typical open pit, non commercial mine would look like in Congo. As you can see, there is no safety equipment, everything is dug by hand, and there are likely armed guards and definitely none of the labor laws and protections we have been discussing throughout this quarter. The wages are extremely low, slave and child labor is common, laborers are often abused and plagued with health problems. Sadly, even today the supply chain is plagued by stories of human exploitation. It is most common and severe at the bottom of the supply chain, where these practices are not easily traceable by companies at the top. Unfortunately, the rampant corruption in places like Congo provide an environment where various middlemen in the supply chain can freely capitalize off of human exploitation. The result is a long chain of buyers and sellers who each share in some degree of negligence and apathy towards other humans at various stages. The officially designated conflict minerals are the first four listed here: tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold. These are predominantly used in computer processors, like the Apple A10 pictured here, which is currently used in the iPhone 7. Since 1998, there have been an estimated 5 million deaths in Congo as a result of conflict mining. Congo is rich in many different minerals and unfortunately has a weak government that is known for accepting bribes and manipulating various conflicts throughout the country. Due to efforts to globally regulate the extraction of gold and the three T minerals, conflict mining has actually been declining, but we'll see in the next slides the role of cobalt in the supply chain and the consequences of not regulating it. When we look at cobalt mining, the focus centers exclusively on Congo, which is the world's largest producer of cobalt. The most lucrative uses for cobalt right now are the lithium ion rechargeable batteries that are in our smartphones, smart devices, and electric cars. The glaring problem is that while conflict mining is globally declining, cobalt was left off of international conflict mineral lists, and it is therefore unregulated, and the working conditions remain unjust and horrible. Much of the initial regulations around conflict mining were aimed to reduce minerals that were funding warfare and terrorism, which cobalt was thought to be clean of. However, it is simply unacceptable for multinational corporations like Apple, Vodafone, and Samsung to have human rights abuses in their supply chains, regardless of whether the mining is funding conflicts. In Congo, 20% of the cobalt comes from what are known as artisanal mines. These are extremely dangerous mining operations, and there are simply no effective regulations in place to protect the workers. Many companies are altogether unable to trace where their cobalt is coming from, and this is simply because no laws require them to do so. Here's a brief timeline on conflict mining in Congo. The main points to know are that the Democratic Republic of Congo was established in 1998. Their government quickly opened the door to various foreign commercial mining operations, and this coincided with the new tech boom, producing minerals for common consumer electronics. In 2010, the Dodd-Frank Act aimed to slow the use of conflict minerals by requiring companies to annually report on their usage. By 2014, Intel declares its processors to be free of conflict minerals. However, in 2016, we're still finding out that our devices are tied to things like child labor and unjust workplaces. In response to a 2016 Washington Post investigation on cobalt mining in Congo, Apple claims as of last week to have suspended all cobalt purchasing from regions where human rights abuses and child labor are taking place. Artisanal miners are miners that essentially dig their own mines and work for themselves. The mining is done with crude tools and is extremely dangerous. Mine shafts are known to extend well beyond 50 feet underground. Workers make less than a few dollars per day and suffer extremely poor health conditions from breathing in the mines. With tools like the ones pictured here, it is needless to say that death is a common occurrence in these types of mines. In 2016, the Washington Post investigated the cobalt mining in southern Congo and found that some of the cobalt being used in everyday devices was mined in conditions like these. They also found that child labor was extremely common, and UNICEF estimates that 40,000 children are currently laboring in Congo's artisanal mines. You can see children here in the upper right washing cobalt. The Post also found that a Chinese supplier, Zhejiang Huayu Cobalt, is the world's largest purchaser of artisanal cobalt. Apple even estimates that at least 20% of their cobalt is purchased from Huayu Cobalt. The president of Huayu Cobalt, Chen Hongliang, admitted in September of 2016 that purchasing artisanal cobalt was a shortcoming of his company and that they simply never thought to question where the minerals were coming from, even when doing business in areas known for conflict mining. This is especially disappointing since many of the large device companies like Apple and Samsung have begun building a brand around their efforts to eradicate human rights abuses from their supply chains. How could this be happening, you may ask? How is widespread child labor still built into our advanced Western economy? This chart may hold one of the answers as to why cobalt was left off the list of regulated conflict minerals by the Dodd-Frank Act. As you can see, Congo, in dark blue, clearly dominates the world's output of cobalt. No other country even comes close. When compared to the other conflict minerals, Congo is only a minor producer globally. The world's dependence on Congo for cobalt likely had something to do with keeping cobalt out of the public eye when it comes to corporate social responsibility. This is what a typical supply chain may look like with respect to cobalt. At the top of the chain are the ones who benefit the most, the consumers and the wealthy corporations. As you work your way down the chain, the benefit becomes less and less until you get to the poverty of the artisanal miners. Unfortunately, cobalt and conflict minerals are not the only place where humans are neglected in this supply chain. It happens higher up as well. Howie is going to take a look at one of Apple's manufacturing partners, Foxconn, and some of the abuses that have occurred higher up in the supply chain there.
One of the biggest suppliers and manufacturer of Apple Inc.'s product has been involved in scandals concerning working conditions of its factory workers. This company is called Foxconn Technology Group. Foxconn has been under media spotlight since the beginning of 2010. Concerns over long working hours, insufficient overtime pay, child labor, poor working, and the living conditions for employees were triggered by frequent and growing number of suicide incidents of factory workers. On July 2009, a 25-year-old man committed suicide after reporting the loss of an iPhone 4 prototype in his possession. In 2010, media reported identified 14 suicides as Foxconn employees. Workers are forced to sign a legally binding document guaranteeing they and their descendants would not sue the company as a result of unexpected deaths, self-injury, or suicide. As alarming and even heartbreaking as the issues at Foxconn's factories are, Apple does not seem to be too concerned with the situation. Its products keep coming out faster than the product of any other electronic company. Foxconn continued to be listed as a supplier on Apple's supplier list. Apple's decision to continue business with Foxconn is questionable and to some may seem to be unethical. Traditional five-question approach to ethical decision-making analysts may provide some guidance here. First, is the decision profitable? Yes. Considering the price of iPhone and the wages of suppliers workers, Apple is making a significant profit on sale. It is convenient Apple to continue business with Foxconn, but the cost of the profit, which is maltreatment to workers who work so hard to manufacture those devices to bring profit to Apple, is too high. It would also be considered unethical according to utilitarianism. This theory says that it is ethical to create the most happiness in you and in others. Also, Apple's management and stockholder may be satisfied with the factory in China because it makes them more money. The people actually working there are suffering greatly. Second, is the decision legal? Definitely, it is not legal if Foxconn did not apply the China's labor law and limit the overtime. Workers are having rights to take day off and it should not be forced to work. Also, it is against the rule from Suppliers Code of Conduct. Third, is the decision fair? No, it is not fair. People who are contribute to make Apple's profits should treat properly. Apple should stand up to speak the right for the workers. Cheaper labor doesn't mean no respect. Fourth, is the decision right? Depends on what view we are looking at the relationship between Foxconn and Apple. As a supplier, Foxconn needs to stay in contract and enforce all the terms to complete the orders. This is right. However, more orders come means more works press on Foxconn's workers, so they might not be able to take any day off and have unfair overtime. This is not right. Fifth, is the decision going to further sustainable development? If there is no change of how Foxconn treats its workers and no action involved from Apple, the issue will become more publicized and the media will catch more. To have a long-term profit, the company or business need to stay good relationship with stakeholders. Once customers start realizing the bad images from the social impact and start concerning if they're paying too much on the devices, Apple might lose customers. Therefore, if the actions or behaviors are stay the same from both companies, the decision is not going to sustainable development. In conclusion, based on the traditional 5-question asked analysis, Apple's relationship with Foxconn is not ethical even it profits both companies. Apple needs to step into this situation and generate more proactive plans. Now, let's take a look what are the action items Apple did to make the improvements. Apple is improving the transparency of its supplier. Just like the image on the right states, there's a right way to make a product. It starts with the right of people who make them. Since Tim Cook started the role of CEO to Apple, he decided to join Fair Label Association, investigating Apple suppliers and reporting the results to the public. Also, Apple provided a program to increase workers' education level. So now, Brad will continue with the ethical analysis of cobalt mining and 5 ethical approaches.
Conflict minerals, the 5 ethical approaches. Utilitarian approach asks, does it produce the most good and does it do the least harm? 60% of all cobalt used in phone batteries comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. An estimated 588 million Apple products exist that have batteries, including Mac, iPad, and iPhone. As many as 12.5 million artisanal miners exist in the Congo. But those numbers comes out to about 2% harmed and 98% at benefit. But the harm is great, including death, child labor, and armed conflict. With respect to rights, the question asked is, are rights respected of all who have a stake? Artisanal mines in Congo have violations of fair wages, happiness, and also the right to safety. The approach of justice asks the question, are people treated equally or proportionately? The miners get unfair pay of $2.80 US dollars to $6.80 US dollars equivalent per day, sometimes as low as $40 per month. Miners' families cannot be allowed basic necessities of water and electricity, even though miners are given minimal of these resources. Miners cannot reliably report ills that occur within the mining companies. Common good approach asks the question, what best serves the community as a whole, not just some members? Most artisanal miners' families are forced to go without necessary food, electricity, and water at the expense of the mining companies. There are no community hospitals or schools in most mining communities. The virtue approach asks the question, what leads me to act as the sort of person I want to be? Artisanal mines in the Congo promote military factions through mining, profit graft. They promote economic graft through illegal Rwandan and Ugandan trade channels. And they also promote child labor. As a solution, we propose the corporate social responsibility reform. Improving corporate social responsibility includes three components: citizenship, governance, and the workplace. And among citizenship, support for better causes and protection of the environment could be promoted. In regard to governments, running the company responsibly and assuring transparency in business. And in regard to the workplace, treating people well in the workplace. Back to the 5 approaches analysis. According to the utilitarian approach, in order to offset and prevent the harms done to the people of Congo, more money should be spent by Apple on philanthropy and fair trade. In regard to rights, Apple should support World Bank or UN guidance for better enforcement of Article 69G 445 of the Congolese Constitution that address social issues and social and environmental responsibility of the Congo's mines. In regard to the justice approach, the promotion of fair trade practices and also promotion of peaceful conditions would benefit. In regard to the common good approach, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development due diligence guidelines would improve the good of all the citizens. And finally, the approach of virtue would suggest that Apple could encourage the adoption of a well-thought-out code of ethics, and also a well-thought-out code of conduct for Congo suppliers and mining companies.
Thank you, Brett. Now arises the question, do we have any laws to prevent the ongoing situation in the DRC? Yes, we do. We do have a Dodd-Frank Act to correct the current situation. Now we will discuss Section 1502 Due Diligence Review and SEC Final Rule of the Dodd-Frank Act. The Section 1502 of Dodd-Frank Act includes a requirement that companies using gold, tin, tungsten, and tantalum make efforts to determine if those materials came from the Democratic Republic of Congo or any neighboring country. The companies are required to carry out a due diligence review of their supply chain to determine whether their minerals purchases are funding armed groups in the eastern DRC. The US Securities and Exchange Commission issued a final rule that is, companies must report publicly on their due diligence and have their reports independently audited. Applicability in general. Under the law, the companies have to submit an annual conflict minerals report to the SEC firstly, if they are required to file reports with the SEC under the Exchange Act of 1934. Secondly, if the conflict minerals are necessary to the functionality or production of a product that they manufacture or contract to be manufactured. This statement contains two separate but critical concepts: the purpose of the conflict mineral in the product or a process, and the control that the company exerts over the manufacturing process. Auditing and reporting requirements. The US Conflict Minerals Law contains two requirements that are closely connected. First, the independent third party supply chain traceability audits. Second, the reporting of audit information to the public and SEC.
Now arises the question, what is the reach of Dodd-Frank Act when it comes to cobalt mining in DRC? Cobalt is not included in the Dodd-Frank Act, although it is a conflict mineral originating in Congo. But there is no law when it comes to the situation of cobalt mining. The condition in the DRC is worsening. But what could be the possible solution to this situation? We need a law which could improve the working condition of the people mining in the DRC. The law should enforce the companies operating in the US and are engaged in getting their resources, which are extracted in the DRC, to act in providing the safe and better working conditions to the people mining over there. As we are done with the legal analysis, now arises the question, what law should ideally be present in the case of DRC? The ideal law that should be present must be an amalgamation of the following laws, rules, acts, policies which are currently into action in the US and DRC. Supplier Code of Conduct. The company's supplier should be required to provide safe working conditions, treat workers with dignity and respect, act fairly and ethically, and use environmentally responsible practices wherever they make products or perform services for them. Audits. Companies should audit their supply chain on a regular basis. There is a high need for companies to act in the betterment of the people working in their supply chain. A transparent supply chain. The companies should make their supply chain transparent. If the companies could do that, this means companies have dealt the situation with fairness. Basic social and economic rights. The workers should get basic social and economic rights enjoyed by the citizens of the US. Laws laid by CSCAM. The companies should make sure that their counterparts in the supply chain working in the DRC should strictly follow all the laws laid by CSCAM, the governing body for all mining activities in the DRC. OECD Guidelines. The mission of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is to promote policies that will improve the economic and social well-being of the people around the world. It must be made mandatory by the government to adopt these guidelines. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, that requires employees have a safe system of work. That should also be included in the law which will govern the situation in DRC.
In conclusion, the United States and foreign governments should work towards improving corporation social responsibility and supply chain governance. Conditions for the miners in Congo and the factory workers in China could be greatly improved by the enactment of mandatory labor laws and wages. When human rights violations are discovered in the supply chain, all of the involved corporations should not be able to simply claim ignorance of the situation as an escape. They should instead be held accountable with harsh financial penalties. Corporations have a responsibility to spend time and money to improve the lives and the conditions of the people that are helping to create their products, especially since so many people in the supply chain are not even be able to share in the benefit of the products they are laboring for. We are Fair Broncos. Thank you guys for watching.